Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, they're debating your health care. Your health care. And I wanted to take a look at what exactly it is that the Republicans are proposing, what exactly is being debated. Now, the New York Times has done us a little bit of a favor for once, but I say a little bit because it's not completely comprehensive in its analysis, but let's take a look at something here. Go ahead. How Republicans have revised their plan to repeal and replace Obamacare. Let us scroll down to the various points. Now let's look at this. Individual mandate. So the Affordable Care Act, as you know, requires people to buy health care. It doesn't just require people to buy health care. It requires people to buy certain types of health care. The policies have to actually be approved by the federal government. I have a big problem with that. The repeal part, according to the New York Times, the Republican bill would eliminate the individual mandate, which means that people would not have to pay a penalty if they went without insurance. One possible effect, though, is that healthy people might be less likely to buy insurance, driving up prices for those who need it most, like older people and the sick. Now notice, nobody asked the New York Times for its opinion, right? This is supposed to be analysis of what the Republican bill does versus what Obamacare does, but they can't help themselves. They go on. To limit this, the plan proposes a continuous coverage incentive which would charge people in the individual market a 30% penalty for lapses in health insurance coverage. So that's a backdoor mandate. So if you don't buy it, you're going to be punished. The problem with all this is, what does it do? Under the Republican bill, as we've talked before, if you're young and you're healthy, why would you buy health care insurance? You'll sit back, you get sick, then you'll buy insurance because pre-existing conditions have to be covered by insurance companies, which means it's not insurance, it's a mandate. And then you pay the 30% penalty on top of whatever you would normally pay. So that's a good deal if you're sitting outside the system, right? Even under the so-called individual mandate, what kind of mandate is it? You're penalized or there's a fine and so forth and so on, but again, you can hang back, it doesn't really matter. This whole mandate thing and this penalty thing, the way you get more people on insurance and to pay for themselves is to bring down the costs. The way you bring down the costs is to have more insurance companies offering more and more types of plans, simpler plans, maybe just catastrophic plans, plans for young people who tend to be healthy and so forth and so on. We don't do that under the Republican bill, and we certainly don't do that under Obamacare. You want to drive down costs and have more people purchase things, you have competition. It's called market capitalism. There's no market capitalism here, not in the Republican bill, certainly not in the Obamacare bill. Let's scroll down one more, please. Employer mandate. Larger companies must provide affordable insurance to their employees or face financial penalties. Well, under the Republican bill, it says, well, you don't have to. Subsidies for out-of-pocket expenses. The federal government provides tax credits to help some people pay deductibles and make co-payments. Would repeal this so-called cost-sharing subsidy in 2020, which means it'll never be repealed. When they talk about out years like this, something that's going to happen in 2020, first of all, that assumes the Republicans will continue to control Congress and the presidency 2020 going into 2021, but that's never going to happen. That's why it's in out years, quote unquote. Next, premium subsidies. The federal government provides tax credits to middle-income Americans on a sliding scale according to income to help offset the cost of premiums and deductibles. Again, that's Obamacare. What's the problem with that? Once again, red tape, bureaucracy, people making decisions on who can and can't afford what. What does it mean to be a middle-income American? What's the cutoff price for that? I mean, if your deductible for a family is $18,000, I don't care if you're in $100,000, $90,000, or $112,000. That's a big nut, because after you pay federal income taxes, state income taxes, local property taxes, and all the rest, that is a big nut. The goal should be competition, lower the prices, more choices. That's the way you handle situations like this, whether you're manufacturing and selling toasters or healthcare. The change. This is a little complicated, but we'll cut to the nub of it in a minute. Would change the way subsidies are distributed by using age instead of income as a way to calculate how much people receive. Tax credits would be available in full to individuals earning less than $75,000 and households earning less than $150,000, but they would be capped for higher earners. First of all, this reads like the Internal Revenue Code. How are regular people or irregular people to try to understand even what's going on here. The subsidy would be $2,000 for a person under 30 and double that for people over 60. The bill would also expand the health plans that qualify for subsidies. The amendment would also allow people to deduct more health care expenses from their income taxes, a provision that might be changed in the Senate to instead increase tax credits to older insurance buyers. Tax credits? Can I address this gobbledygook for a minute? Tax credits? We talked about this. How do you get tax credits to people who don't pay enough taxes to get credits? It's like the Earned Income Tax Credit. They want you to think here that you're getting money back that you paid in. You're not getting money back that you paid in. These are called subsidies. This is called welfare in the old, English language. That is, people are getting tax credits on taxes they didn't pay to subsidize them so they can purchase premiums on policies that the government selects, that the government compels, essentially. Let's move down. Medicaid expansion. More than 30 states, 31 exactly, expanded Medicaid coverage by raising the eligibility cutoff to 138% of the poverty level. Medicaid is, or was, a welfare program to give medical care for people who cannot afford it. So when you hear all the time, what about poor people who can't afford health care? That's what Medicaid was created to do in the 1960s. 25 cents out of every dollar, I've said it 1,000 times, that your state spends goes to Medicaid. Now, what the federal government did under Obamacare is for the first couple of years under Obamacare, they encouraged governors and state legislatures to expand Medicaid beyond the poverty level, 138% above the poverty level. So poverty level, 100%, 38% above that, okay? And they said, if you do that under Obamacare, we will pay 100% of Medicaid for the first 3 years. So you had all these governors and legislatures falling over themselves saying, hey, we can get more and more people on Medicaid, 138%, and we don't have to pay a thing. But what about year 4, 5, 6, the out years? We're not going to worry about that. I'm only governor once. I'm only a state senator. Come on, let's do it. Let's grab the money while we can. And then we'll lobby Congress and the president to continue this state welfare program, to continue it. 31 governors and legislatures jumped for it. Kasich, Chris Christie, in part, Mike Pence, the Republican governor Sandoval of Nevada, Martinez, the Republican governor of New Mexico, Snyder, the Republican governor of Michigan. I can go on and on and on. All the blue state governors did the same thing. So now we have this massive Medicaid entitlement program for states. And the states don't want to change. So what does the Republican bill do? Would let states keep Medicaid expansion and allow states that expanded Medicaid to continue getting federal funding as they would have under the Obamacare law until 2020. Federal funding for people who became newly eligible starting in 2020 or who left the program and came back, however, would be reduced. Now, does anybody believe, again, that come 2020, right there at the precipice of the next election, that all of a sudden Congress is going to get together and say, you know what, we're cutting this off. No more expansion of Medicaid. States, you're on your own, or we're not going to pay 100% anymore. That's never going to happen. We have a new welfare program for states. Federal funding for people who became newly eligible, you see, would be reduced. But the people who are on it at 138%, they're going to continue to pour into these programs. The governors and state legislatures are going to continue to push as many people as they can on Medicaid because forevermore, the federal government will pay for that individual on Medicaid. Forevermore. The bill also proposes capping federal funding per enrollee based on how much each state was spending in 2016. Listen to this. This is a phony ploy on federalism. The amendment would allow states to impose work requirements for some Medicaid beneficiaries, so states can impose work requirements, but they don't have to. Well, what kind of deal is that? There ought to be work requirements, period, if you're going to get some kind of a welfare benefit, as far as I'm concerned, or at least you should try to get a job. We used to have that on workfare, remember, under welfare? But Obama got rid of it. Rather than per capita funding. Oh, I love this one. Medicaid beneficiaries give states the option to receive a lump sum block grant for Medicaid rather than per capita funding. They're going to get far more money based on per capita funding, how many people they can shove into Medicaid, than they are on the block grant front. So why would a state choose block grant monies? They're not going to. States that haven't expanded Medicaid already would not be allowed to do so in the future. So I'm one of the 19 states run by a responsible Republican legislature, by a responsible Republican governor. Pick some. Pick Florida, pick Wisconsin, pick what you will. Those states are being told, you may not expand Medicaid in the future, period. So some states who acted responsibly are quote unquote punished. Other states, in my view, that acted irresponsibly, it's a windfall. It would also stop allowing states to cover adults with incomes above 133% of the federal poverty level after this year. Okay, they mean 138%, as we just discussed. Next bullet, please. Health savings accounts. In 2017, an individual can put $3,400 in, and a family $6,750 into a tax-free health savings account. Let me ask you something. $3,400 for an individual, what would that pay for? 3 days in a hospital? 3 days in a hospital? Why is there, where did that come from, $3,400? If I'm a young man and I'm working hard, and I'm 28 or 29 or 30 years old, and I don't earn a hell of a lot, but I want to put as much money as I can into a health savings account, maybe $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year. Why can't I do it? What is the problem? And I become less of a burden to society or to anybody else if I'm that responsible where I want to put the money aside just in case for a catastrophe. What's the change? Would allow people to put substantially more money into their health savings account and let the spouses make additional contributions. So the basic limit would be at least $6,550 for an individual, $13,100 for a family beginning in 2018. Why are there any limits? The amendment would no longer allow consumers to roll over excess tax credit money into health savings accounts. Okay, fine. What they also don't tell you on that particular bullet is what? Under the Republican plan, they do in fact limit what you can spend your money on. You can use that money, for instance, to purchase one of the government-approved health care plans. You cannot use that money to purchase a government health care plan that is not approved by the government, as an example. So there are other restrictions on it which are nonsensical. Restrictions on charging more for older Americans. Plans can charge their oldest customers only 3 times the price it's charged to the younger ones. Would allow insurers to charge older customers 5 times as much as younger ones and give states the option to set their own ratio. This was 2 days ago. They just withdrew that. Now that's all well and good. But the reason why older customers were expected to pay somewhat more than younger customers is because it's a matter of fact. It's a matter of statistical evidence that older people use more health care than younger people. And so the thinking was, okay, then older people should pay a little bit more. Well, the Republicans decided, no, we can't do that. That's our base, so we better stop that. Now, what isn't changed? What they call the cost drivers, what drives up the cost of insurance and makes it not insurance. Dependent coverage until 26. Children can stay on their parents' insurance policies until age 26. How many of you who are my age, 59, 60, 50, 65, how many of you when you were 25 were on your parents' health care plan? I'm being quite honest about this. Now, one of the reasons that our children or young adults are on our health care plans now is because they can't find another plan under Obamacare or what will be the Republican plan. Moreover, when I was young, I could pretty much pick from 25 or 30 different plans, call one of 20 or 30 different insurance companies or subsidiaries of insurance companies and get catastrophic coverage, get the least amount of coverage that I needed. You can't do that today. So once again, competition drives down prices. Competition creates more options. And rather than doing that, they continue this Stalinist type, top-down, iron-fisted Obamacare. You must cover children up to the age of 26. Well, when they're up to the age of 26, they may be your child, but they're still young adults. Next one, pre-existing conditions policy requires insurers to cover people regardless of pre-existing medical conditions, and bars the companies from charging more based on a person's health history. That is nuts. That's nuts. Let's say I'm 42 years old, and I don't have any health care. And then I get cancer. And then I say, okay, I want health care. In other words, I decide to buy home insurance when the house is burning down. The idea that you shouldn't pay more is absurd. That discourages people from doing the right thing. It reinforces bad behavior. And therefore, people who have insurance, or people who put money aside and so forth, and people who don't, are to pay exactly the same premium. That's insanity. And yet the Republicans continue that. Essential health benefits. All insurers must offer 10 essential health benefits, including maternity care and preventive services. Well, obviously, if you're a male, maternity care is not an essential health benefit. And if you're a female, prostate exams are not an essential health benefit. So here we have politicians and bureaucrats, and there are more than 10. There's 110, laying out what it is that you're required to do if you're an insurance company in terms of offering insurance. These are partly the main reasons why the price of insurance is through the roof and why this cannot be sustained, and it won't be sustained. Prohibitions on annual and lifetime limits. Insurers are barred from setting a limit on how much they have to pay to cover someone. Why? Why? Why are they barred from placing a limit? I mean, they place limits on everything. In other words, let's take an example. I come into the country. I'm newly into the country, right? And by the way, illegal aliens, they get this too. Oh, yes, 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 they get this too. I come into the country. I don't buy any insurance. All of a sudden, I have a heart attack. They find out I have horrific heart disease. I got to have oxygen. I got to have this. I got to have this for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life. There's no cap, right? It's a pre-existing condition, right? They pay whatever everybody else pays, right? Well, how can you ever sustain that on any kind of a financial model whatsoever? It's not possible. It's not possible. Insurance companies used to sell plans with $5 million limits, $10 million limits, $1 million limits, and so forth and so on. Why shouldn't they be able to do that? In other words, here's my question. Apart from what insurance companies can do, why can't I, as an American citizen, decide what kind of health care I want to buy? Insurance is about risk. If you pay more, the risk is less. If you pay less, the risk is more. Why shouldn't I be able to do that? Well, Mark, it's because health care is a right. Well, if health care is a right, ladies and gentlemen, even under the Veterans Administration, even under the VA, if I won health care today and I served my country, if I did, and I didn't, but I'm talking about as an example, I fought on the battlefield in some war, and I come back to the United States, and maybe I have physical issues or psychological issues or whatever it is. Does that mean if health care is a right, I have a right to see my doctor immediately whenever I think I need to? No. Does it mean I have a right to see whatever doctor I want? No. Does it mean I have a right to go to whatever hospital I want? No. Does it mean I have a right to get whatever medicine I want? No. Now that's under the government monopolized and controlled and run VA system. So when you say you have a right to health care, that's a meaningless phrase. It doesn't mean anything. So I would encourage you, there's still time. I believe the vote's going to be tomorrow. This is what we call a Levin surge on radio, Levin surge on Levin TV. Call your member of the House of Representatives. There's no point in calling the Senate now. The action's not in the Senate. Find out who your House member is, call their office, and politely state, I would ask that you vote no on Rhino care. Repeal in name only. I would ask that you vote no. No. That's what you should do, in my view. And here's the number, 202-225-3121. 202-225-3121. If it's busy, call again. If there's a voicemail, be polite and leave a message. You can send them emails too. You can Google it and find out the information as well. But this needs to be defeated. It is truly unfortunate that the Republican leadership has, in fact, persuaded this administration to go along with it. It's truly unfortunate. You hear the politics now. You're either voting for Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump. No, 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 no. We're not voting for Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump. We're voting on whether or not we want a workable, efficient, effective, quality healthcare system for our constituents, for the people of the United States. This is not about Pelosi or Trump. It's not about the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. It's about you.